Everyone's worried about sleep deprivation in the average adult, but how often do we talk about it in teenagers? Not often enough, given that it's a real problem and a problem we could solve. That's the topic of this week's Healthcare Triage. As a pediatrician, I find that there are a few topics that parents want to discuss more than sleep. Parents worry about their own sleep deprivation when babies arrive. Later, they worry about their children's. I almost never encounter patients who are convinced they're getting the recommended amount of sleep. It's harder than you might think to determine how much sleep an adult actually requires. Modern technology has significantly altered how and when we might naturally sleep. Electricity allows us to be productive long after the sun has gone down. Coffee and other stimulants allow us to wake up more quickly. Measuring natural levels of sleep would require us to return to a simpler time. And while there aren't a lot of people who are willing to live without electric lights and coffee, there are a few. As part of a German science television show, 5 men and women volunteered to return to Stone Age conditions for 8 weeks. They had no smartphones or internet, no electricity or running water, no alarm clocks, or any clocks for that matter. Enterprising scientists took advantage of this ultimate paleo lifestyle to make some measurements. Before the study, the participants went to sleep, and I'm talking medians here, about 20 minutes before midnight. Without interference from modern amenities, their bedtimes moved up about 2 hours. Before the experiment, they woke up around 7 a.m. Under Stone Age conditions, they woke up about a half hour earlier. Counting the periods of awake time between going to sleep and waking up in the morning, they had been spending less than 6 hours of sleep each night before the experiment, and without outside interference, they slept about 7.25 hours a night. This might be the closest we'll get to figuring out what a modern human body naturally requires. Granted, many people probably aren't getting that much sleep. In 2013, the National Sleep Foundation released the results of a survey on sleep among people 25 to 55 in 6 countries. Canadians and Mexicans topped the list at 7.1 hours a night, followed by Germans at 7 and residents of Britain at 6.8. Bringing up the rear were Americans at 6.5 hours and Japanese at 6.4. Sleeping hours are disproportionate across the socioeconomic spectrum as well. The more you make, the less you sleep. Almost half of people earning less than $30,000 a year slept at least 6 hours a night, compared with about a third of those earning at least $75,000. Americans also sleep less than we used to. In 1942, almost 85% of us slept at least 7 hours a night. Today, less than 60% of us do. Not getting enough sleep is a big problem. Randomized controlled trials show that people who are sleep deprived can see decreases in their empathy. More than one such study has shown that sleep deprivation can leave people more sensitive to pain. Sleep deprivation can hurt cognition, and it's associated with many car accidents. But serious sleep deprivation in adults is most likely rarer than many think it is. After all, people in controlled studies of sleep deprivation are usually getting very little sleep. Complicating things, not all people react to sleep deprivation the same way. Some people just need less sleep, and that may be somewhat genetic. Many news reports that highlight the dangers from too little sleep are assuming that all adults need at least 8 hours, and there's little evidence that's so. There's one group where that might not be true, however. Younger people need more sleep than adults. The National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute recommends that newborn babies get 16 to 18 hours of sleep a day. It's likely that many of them get that because we let them. As I tell parents all the time, only a fool wakes a sleeping baby. The usual recommendation for preschool children is 11 to 12 hours, school-age children 10 hours, and teenagers about 9 to 10 hours a night. It's likely few teenagers are sleeping that much. The most obvious reason for that is that the high school day generally starts so early. For my 2 oldest children, when they took the bus, it arrived at 6:45 a.m. To get 9 hours of sleep, they'd have to be asleep by 9:15. Many teenagers are engaged in activities after school. They eat dinner late so that they can be with their parents who probably work late. They also need time to get their homework done, let alone have any type of social life. There's no good reason school has to start this early, and starting it later might improve the amount of sleep teenagers get. A study published in 2014 examined 9,000 students in 8 public schools in 3 states. It found that in high schools where classes began at 7:30 a.m., about a third of children got at least 8 hours of sleep a night. If they started at 8:35 a.m., about 60% of children achieved that goal. Moreover, the later start time was associated with improvements in a number of subjects, as well as state and national achievement test scores. Attendance increased. Perhaps more important, the number of car crashes by drivers 16 to 18 was reduced by 70% when school start times were changed from 7:35 to 8:55. It's for reasons like these that the American Academy of Pediatrics released a policy statement in 2014 calling for a shift in school start times to 8:30 a.m. or later. Few school systems, however, have heeded the call. Many media stories about sleep breathlessly worry that the average American is at grave risk because of sleep deprivation. Even if it were true, that could be improved for many of us by choosing to turn off our devices and shutting our eyes just a little bit sooner. Too few stories focus on those who are really at risk for sleep deprivation, namely teenagers. It's not their fault. We could fix this problem for them. Hey, did you enjoy this episode? You might enjoy this other episode on sleep. Are you getting enough? Probably not. It also helps if you like and subscribe down below, and also if you go to patreon.com/healthcaretriage, where you can help support the show, make it bigger and better. We'd especially like to thank our research associate Joe Sevitz, and of course, our Surgeon Admiral Sam.